The galaxy's desperation. Across the vast reaches of space, the galaxy had known peace for centuries. The great civilizations, alien empires, ancient species, and powerful starfaring races had all settled into their own territories, respecting each other's borders and living in an uneasy, yet manageable balance. But all of that was about to change. The Encore, a once mighty species known for their advanced technology and ruthless military, were facing an unimaginable crisis. Their homeworld, Ulara, had been invaded. But this wasn't just any attack. It wasn't a raid by a rival empire or a skirmish over resources. The Encore were being slaughtered by an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. And in their moment of desperation, they sent out a call for help. The distress signal was broadcasted across the galaxy, reaching every corner of space. It was a final plea, a cry for help that echoed through the stars. The message was clear. The Encore were losing. Their cities were burning, their fleets were shattered, and their soldiers were falling. The unknown enemy was too powerful, too relentless. No matter how advanced the Encore's technology was, they were no match for this new force. Their weapons, once the envy of the galaxy, were now useless against the invaders' superior tactics and weapons. "Help us, or we will fall," the message pleaded, transmitted in all known languages of the galaxy. The tone was one of utter despair, a species on the brink of extinction. On board the Encore flagship, the command center was in chaos. Officers scrambled to maintain control, but the reality was clear. The Encore were on the edge of annihilation. A massive force was tearing through their homeworld, unstoppable and merciless. Ships exploded in the distance as the enemy's forces showed no mercy. The Encore had never known such fear. But the greatest shock came when they realized that no one was answering their call. The galaxy had turned a blind eye. The powerful Xyrillians, the ancient Etherians, and even the once ally Quella dynasty ignored the distress signal, too busy with their own politics or indifferent to the plight of another species. The Encore were alone. Their long-standing arrogance and pride had made them enemies among many, and now no one cared enough to come to their aid. Captain Kira, a human officer stationed in the far reaches of space, was the first to hear the Encore's distress call. She had been leading a small fleet of human vessels on a routine mission when the message came through. At first, Kira thought it was a trap, or perhaps some kind of hoax. The Encore had a reputation for being ruthless, and their enemies were many. But the message carried a weight of desperation that she had never heard before. Her crew, a mix of humans from all over Earth, were silent as the message repeated. "The galaxy has abandoned us." The Encore commander's voice broke through the transmission, trembling. "You are our last hope. If you do not help, we will be wiped out. Please." Kira stared at the holographic screen in front of her. The words echoed in her mind, and she could almost feel the weight of them pressing down on her chest. She glanced at her officers, each one equally uneasy. They knew of the Encore's reputation, an empire that had conquered and oppressed countless species. They had once been the apex predators of the galaxy. Now, they were a species on the brink of extinction, begging for mercy from those they had once looked down upon. "This isn't our fight," Lieutenant Daniels, her second in command, said quietly, his voice filled with doubt. "Why should we help them? Let them face their own end. They've made enemies everywhere. This is what they deserve." But Kira couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Despite everything, she couldn't turn away from a cry for help, no matter who it came from. And deep down, she knew that this wasn't just about the Encore. There was something bigger at play here, something that could threaten every living being in the galaxy. She leaned forward in her chair and activated the communication console. "Send a response," she ordered. The crew turned to look at her, confused. "Tell them we will respond." "But Captain," Daniels protested, "you can't seriously be considering this, can you? We're talking about a species that has slaughtered entire worlds." "I'm considering it," Kira said, her voice firm. If we don't, no one else will." The crew fell silent. Kira knew it wasn't a popular decision. Many would argue it was foolish. Others would see it as a waste of resources, even a suicide mission. But Kira was not one to shy away from a challenge. She believed in humanity's ability to do the impossible, even when others doubted them. She had always thought that humans had something unique, something other species didn't, an unyielding spirit to fight against all odds. "I'll do it," Kira said, making up her mind. "Prepare the fleet for immediate deployment." As her orders were carried out, Kira couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. Humanity was about to enter a war they knew little about. The Encore had been one of the most powerful species in the galaxy, and if they couldn't stop this enemy, what hope did humans have? But there was something else, something in the way the Encore had pleaded for help. They weren't just asking for aid. They were pleading for survival, for the chance to continue existing. Kira couldn't ignore that. The human fleet's engines roared to life as it prepared to jump to the Encore homeworld. Kira's mind raced as she considered the risks. Would humanity be able to make a difference? Was this a mistake? Or were they truly the only ones who could respond to the galaxy's cry for help? As the fleet made its jump toward speed, the stars stretched and blurred into a long, shimmering line. Kira's thoughts were interrupted by the voice of her communications officer. "Captain, we're receiving another transmission from the Encore." Kira took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Put it through." The hologram of the Encore commander appeared once again, his eyes wide with fear. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely audible. "You are the last hope." The galaxy had called for help, and humanity was the only one willing to answer. Now they had to prove they were more than just survivors. They had to become the galaxy's saviors. As the human fleet cut through the stars, Captain Kira stood at the front of the command deck, staring out at the endless blackness of space. She knew what was at stake. The Encore had sent a desperate plea, and now humanity was responding. But she couldn't ignore the doubts creeping into her mind. This was uncharted territory. They were about to step into a war against an enemy that had wiped out some of the most powerful species in the galaxy. Behind her, the crew worked tirelessly, preparing for the unknown. Engineers adjusted the ship's systems, officers fine-tuned weapons and shields, and strategists pored over every scrap of information they could find about the Encore and their enemies. But there was so little known. The Encore hadn't even been able to identify who was attacking them. All they knew was that they were facing something terrifying. "Captain," Lieutenant Daniels approached cautiously, his expression grim. "Are you sure about this? We don't even know what we're up against. The Encore weren't exactly friendly to us when we first met them. They've made enemies everywhere. This is a dangerous gamble." Kira turned to face him, her jaw set in determination. She had heard the same objections from other officers, but she wouldn't let fear or uncertainty stop her now. "I'm sure, Daniels, if we don't respond, no one will. The galaxy is ignoring their cries for help. If we want to be the kind of people our children will look up to, then we have to stand up. We can't let our future be defined by inaction." The room fell silent as her words hung in the air. They were facing something far beyond what any of them had ever experienced, but Kira wasn't about to back down. Humanity had always been underestimated, but that had never stopped them before. They had survived worse, and they had always found a way to fight back. And right now, humanity's only hope was the one they least expected, the human fleet. "Understood, Captain," Daniels said finally, his tone softening. "We'll follow your lead." As Kira gave the order to jump into hyperspace, her mind raced with thoughts of what awaited them. The Encore, once a formidable empire, were now helpless, and it was humanity's job to save them. But how? What could they possibly do against an enemy that had already devastated the Encore's mighty fleet? She knew it wouldn't be easy, and the risk was enormous. But sometimes you had to take risks to make a difference. The fleet made its jump into hyperspace, and the stars stretched into lines of light. As the vast emptiness of space surrounded them, Kira felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just leading a mission anymore. She was leading humanity's chance to prove that they belonged on the galactic stage. And that was a responsibility unlike any other. Hours passed, and Kira couldn't help but notice the growing tension among her crew. This was no longer just a routine mission. The silence on the command deck was deafening. The officers and crew members exchanged anxious glances, each of them aware of the risks ahead. It was clear that the galaxy had underestimated humanity's ability to survive, but that didn't mean they were ready to step into a war they didn't fully understand. "We're coming out of hyperspace in 5 minutes," announced the communications officer, breaking the silence. Kira nodded and turned to her crew. "Prepare yourselves. We don't know what we're walking into, but we need to be ready for anything." The tension on the bridge grew as the countdown continued. The crew worked in silence, but the feeling of anticipation was palpable. No one knew what to expect when they arrived at the Encore homeworld. Would the enemy still be there, waiting for them? Would they be able to make a difference? Or would they, too, become just another casualty in this never-ending war? As the countdown reached 0, the stars in front of them blurred, and the human fleet emerged from hyperspace. What they saw took their breath away. The Encore homeworld, Yulara, was a sight unlike anything any of them had ever seen before. The once thriving planet was now a wasteland. The sky was dark with smoke, and massive fires burned in every corner of the world. The Encore's towering cities, once marvels of alien engineering, now lay in ruins, crumbling under the weight of destruction. In the distance, a massive enemy fleet hovered like a dark cloud, ready to unleash another wave of destruction. It was unlike any battle they had ever seen. The enemy's ships were massive, their technology far beyond anything humanity had encountered. Their ships glowed with an eerie, unnatural light, and the sheer size of their fleet was staggering. They were clearly a force to be reckoned with. But what caught Kira's attention the most were the Encore ships that still floated among the ruins. They were battered, destroyed, and seemingly useless. But they weren't abandoned. Some were still operational, and they were trying, with every ounce of strength, to fight back. "Captain," Daniels called out from his station, his voice filled with disbelief. What? What are we up against? This is unlike anything we've ever seen." Kira looked out at the battlefield, her heart pounding. She had always believed that humanity could fight against impossible odds, but seeing it firsthand was different. The enemy's forces were overwhelming, their power unimaginable. But they were not invincible. Kira knew that the Encore had one thing that the enemy did not: willpower, and humanity had more than enough of that to make a difference. "We're going in," Kira said, her voice steady. "We're going to fight, and we're going to show them that humanity is not a species to be ignored." As the human fleet engaged the enemy forces, the odds were stacked against them. But one thing was clear: humanity wasn't afraid to fight, and they would fight with everything they had. The tension on the bridge of the human flagship was palpable as Captain Kira watched the battle unfold before her. The view outside was nothing short of terrifying. The enemy fleet, with its enormous ships and advanced weapons, dominated the sky above the Encore homeworld. The once beautiful planet, now a desolate wasteland, was surrounded by the wreckage of what had been a mighty civilization. Humanity's fleet was vastly outnumbered, and the odds were stacked against them in every way. "We're outmatched," Lieutenant Daniels muttered, his eyes fixed on the holographic battlefield map in front of him. "This is suicide, Captain. They have at least 3 times our firepower." Kira's jaw tightened, but her resolve only grew stronger. She couldn't afford to back down now. The Encore had trusted them, and humanity had come here to fight for more than just survival. They had come to show the galaxy that they could make a difference, that they could stand up to the darkness when no one else would, no matter the odds. "Adjust course," Kira ordered firmly. "We're going to get in close. I want all guns firing on their flagship. That's our first target." The crew scrambled into action as the fleet moved into position. Kira's ship, the Savior, surged forward, its engines roaring as it cut through the emptiness of space toward the heart of the battle. All around them, the human ships followed suit, each one braving the oncoming storm. "They're targeting us," shouted Commander Johnson from the weapons station, his voice filled with urgency. "Incoming fire, Captain. It's massive." Before Kira could respond, the ship shuddered violently as a blast hit its shields. The impact sent a ripple through the bridge, and the lights flickered for a brief moment. For a split second, Kira felt the weight of the situation bear down on her. They were vulnerable, and every decision now felt like it could be their last. "Shields holding," Johnson reported, his voice a bit more steady now. "But we can't take too many of those." "Return fire," Kira ordered, her voice unwavering. "Concentrate all firepower on their flagship. We can't waste time with the smaller ships." As the Savior engaged the enemy flagship, a massive alien vessel that dwarfed any ship humanity had ever built, the crew worked in perfect unison. The ship's guns roared to life, firing concentrated bursts of energy at the enemy vessel. But the alien flagship's shields were powerful, absorbing most of the fire with ease. "They're adapting," said Lieutenant Daniels, his fingers flying over the control panels. "Their shields are adjusting to our frequency. We need to find a weakness, Captain." Kira clenched her fists, knowing that every second mattered. She looked out at the battlefield, trying to find an opening. Her eyes scanned the enemy ships, searching for any sign of vulnerability. And then it hit her. The enemy's flagship wasn't moving. It was anchored in place, like a fortress. "There," Kira said, pointing to a massive cannon mounted on the flagship's underbelly. "That cannon, it's their weak spot. If we can disable it, their defenses will weaken." "Understood," Daniels responded. "But we'll have to get in close to hit it, and that means getting past their smaller ships." Kira looked at her crew, each one of them focused and determined. They knew the risks, but there was no turning back now. They were already in the heart of the battle, and humanity had one shot at winning this. "Do it. Get us close. Full speed ahead." The Savior surged forward, dodging incoming fire and weaving through the chaos of the battle. It was a heart-pounding maneuver, but Kira trusted her crew. As they neared the flagship, the enemy's smaller ships swarmed like bees, their weapons firing in rapid succession. The human ships fought back, taking out several of the enemy vessels, but the odds were still overwhelming. "Captain, we're almost there," Daniel said, his voice tense. "We've got one chance," Kira said. "Make it count." With a steady hand, Daniels piloted the Savior closer, weaving through the barrage of fire. They were within range now. Kira could see the massive cannon beneath the flagship. Her heart raced as she waited for the right moment. The crew held their breath as Daniels adjusted their trajectory, guiding them into the perfect position. "Firing," Johnson shouted, his voice cutting through the tension. The Savior fired a concentrated blast at the cannon, the energy beam slicing through the void. For a moment, time seemed to slow as the beam connected with the enemy flagship's weak spot. The explosion was massive, lighting up the dark expanse of space. The shockwave sent a ripple through the battlefield, and for a moment, all was still. Then, the enemy flagship's shields flickered and weakened. The blast had done it. They had found the weakness. "Yes," Daniel shouted, a look of triumph on his face. "We did it. Their shields are down." But the victory was short-lived. As the enemy flagship's shields began to falter, the remaining enemy ships launched a counterattack. They fired everything they had, sending wave after wave of deadly energy blasts toward the human fleet. "Brace for impact," Kira shouted, as another round of fire struck their ship. The Savior groaned under the strain, and the bridge lights flickered once more. For a moment, it felt as though everything might fall apart. "Captain, the enemy is regrouping," Daniels warned. "They're not going down easily." Kira's mind raced as she assessed the situation. The human fleet had taken out several of the enemy's smaller ships, and the flagship was now vulnerable. But the remaining enemy vessels were angry and determined, and they weren't going to let go of their prize so easily. The battle had just begun, and the human fleet was already taking heavy damage. "We need reinforcements," Kira said through clenched teeth, her voice fierce. "Send out a distress signal to any nearby ships. We can't do this alone." As the human fleet pressed on, every moment was a fight for survival. Kira could see the determination in her crew's eyes. They weren't giving up, not while there was breath in their bodies. Humanity had entered this fight with one purpose: to show the galaxy that they could stand against the darkness. But now they had to prove that they could survive the firestorm they had walked into. As the battle raged on, Kira knew that the galaxy was watching, and if humanity could survive this, if they could turn the tide, then they would no longer be seen as just a fledgling species. They would become a force that could not be ignored. The battle raged on, a constant barrage of energy blasts and explosions filling the vast emptiness of space. The Savior shook with every impact, the ship groaning under the strain. Kira could feel the weight of every second pressing down on her. They had made progress, taken down one of the enemy's key weapons, but the fight was far from over. "Shields are holding, Captain," Lieutenant Johnson called out, his voice strained but steady. "But the integrity is starting to drop. We can't keep taking hits like this." Kira's mind raced. They needed to end this quickly. If they didn't, they would lose their only chance at survival. The enemy wasn't going to let up. Their smaller ships continued to swarm around them like angry wasps, their weapons relentless. It was clear now that humanity wasn't just fighting for their own survival. They were fighting to prove something to the galaxy. "We're not backing down," Kira said, her voice cold and determined. "Prepare to launch a full assault on the enemy's remaining fleet. We'll hit them where it hurts." She turned to the tactical officer, Lieutenant Daniels. "Send the order out to all ships. Full offensive, now." Daniels didn't hesitate. He was already transmitting the orders, his fingers flying over the controls. The human fleet had taken losses, but they still had numbers, and they had humanity's unyielding resolve. The Savior surged forward once again, cutting through the debris and chaos of the battlefield. Kira could see the enemy flagship in the distance, still reeling from the previous blow, its shields flickering and struggling to hold. But the rest of the alien fleet wasn't giving up. They were reorganizing, preparing for a counterstrike that could end the human resistance in a heartbeat. "This is it," Kira muttered under her breath. "We either win or we die trying." The human fleet, coordinated and determined, broke into smaller formations, each ship moving with precision. Kira's flagship led the charge, its guns blazing with renewed intensity. The smaller alien ships attempted to block their path, but the humans were relentless, cutting through the enemy forces with surgical precision. "Captain, we've got company," Commander Johnson shouted, his eyes wide with alarm. Another wave of enemy reinforcements incoming. Fast. Kira's heart raced as she saw the new enemy ships on the horizon. More massive vessels were arriving, their sheer size and weaponry overwhelming. The humans were outnumbered again, and the battle was beginning to look hopeless once more. But Kira wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. "Send out another distress signal," she ordered. "We need reinforcements now. All ships, focus on the largest enemy ship. We need to take it down." The Savior turned toward the incoming wave of reinforcements, its weapons lighting up the void of space. The crew worked tirelessly, firing on the larger enemy ships. Each blast that connected sent shockwaves through space, but the enemy's shields were holding strong. The Savior was starting to take damage again, and Kira knew they couldn't keep this up forever. "Captain," Daniels said, his voice urgent, "we've received a response. Reinforcements are on the way. But they're still too far out to help us." Kira felt a surge of frustration. She needed those reinforcements now. They were out of time. But then a voice broke through her thoughts. "Captain," Lieutenant Johnson said, his voice shaky but filled with awe. You need to see this. Kira turned toward him, and her breath caught in her throat. On the far edge of the battlefield, a new fleet was emerging from the darkness of space. These ships were different. They were smaller than the enemy vessels, but sleek and fast, with advanced designs that Kira had never seen before. And they were coming fast, too fast for the enemy to react. "Who are they?" Kira asked, barely able to believe her eyes. "They're human ships," Daniel said, his voice filled with disbelief. "But we've never seen ships like those before. They're from the colonies." The colonies, the distant human settlements on the edge of known space. Kira had heard rumors of these ships, but no one had ever seen them in action. These were ships built for speed and surprise, equipped with the latest technology and advanced weaponry. As the new fleet entered the battlefield, it was clear that the enemy hadn't been prepared for this kind of reinforcements. The human ships moved with lightning speed, weaving through the chaos of the battle and striking with deadly precision. The alien fleet, already battered and struggling, now found itself facing a fresh and aggressive force. "They're here," Kira said, a fierce grin spreading across her face. Humanity's last hope. The new human fleet dove into the fray with a vengeance, their weapons firing in rapid succession. The aliens, caught off guard, struggled to respond. The tide of the battle had shifted. The humans were no longer on the defensive. Now, they were taking the fight to the enemy. "We're pushing them back," Commander Johnson shouted, his eyes wide with excitement. "Their ships are retreating. The tide is turning." Kira could hardly believe it. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the impossible had happened. Humanity's fleet, once outnumbered and on the brink of destruction, was now winning. The alien forces that had once seemed invincible were faltering, their ships falling one by one as the humans pressed forward. "We need to finish this," Kira said, her voice steady but fierce. "Concentrate all fire on their flagship. We can end this now." The human fleet, bolstered by the new reinforcements, focused its firepower on the enemy flagship. The alien ship, once a symbol of overwhelming strength, was now crumbling under the onslaught. Its shields began to flicker and fail, and its weapons faltered. "This is it," Kira said, a sense of finality in her voice. "Let's end this." With a final devastating volley of fire, the Savior and the new human fleet struck the enemy flagship. The ship exploded in a massive ball of light, sending debris scattering in all directions. For a moment, the entire battlefield seemed to pause. And then, the alien fleet began to retreat. The once mighty invaders, their ships destroyed or crippled, were no longer a threat. The humans had done it. Against all odds, they had won. The galaxy had called for aid, and humanity had answered. The battle for the Encore homeworld was over, and humanity had proven, without a doubt, that they were a force to be reckoned with. The victory was still sinking in, but Kira knew this battle was far from over. The enemy fleet had been decimated, but the war was bigger than just this one confrontation. The Savior and the newly arrived human fleet had dealt a decisive blow, but there was something more lurking beneath the surface. The alien forces had been crushed, but their leaders were still out there, waiting. Kira stood on the command deck of the Savior, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. The view outside the ship's large observation window was a blur of light and dark, distant stars, broken fragments of ships, and the endless expanse of space. The silence was almost deafening. Her heart still pounded in her chest from the battle, but her mind was already moving to the next phase. "We can't rest yet," Kira said, her voice steady, but tinged with an edge of urgency. "Prepare for our next move. The galaxy may think we've won, but the war is far from over." Lieutenant Johnson, standing next to her, nodded. "What's the next step, Captain?" Kira turned to face him, her expression hard. "We find the leaders. We find out who's really in charge and end this once and for all." The alien leaders had been quiet during the battle. They had kept their distance, seemingly letting their fleet handle things. But Kira knew that if they allowed the enemy leadership to escape, they would only come back stronger. The galaxy was on the brink of peace, but it was fragile. They couldn't risk letting the invaders regroup. "We've been scanning their communications," Lieutenant Daniels said from his station. "We've picked up a signal. It's coming from an unknown location. Seems like it's the command center of the enemy fleet." Kira's eyes narrowed. This was it, the final act. "Get me the coordinates. We're going in," she said firmly. The crew worked quickly, their actions a perfect blend of experience and desperation. The galaxy had been watching, waiting for humanity to either collapse or rise. Kira wasn't about to let them down. The Sager powered up its engines, cutting through space with deadly speed. The newly arrived human fleet followed suit, forming a protective circle around the flagship. There was no turning back now. The final showdown was coming, and humanity's fate was in their hands. "We've got the coordinates," Daniels reported. "It's on the edge of the Acri system. We'll need to navigate through a dense asteroid field to get there, but we can do it." Kira gave a firm nod. The asteroid field was treacherous, full of hidden dangers, and a perfect place for the enemy to set up a final stronghold. But it didn't matter. Humanity had come this far. They would finish what they started. The fleet approached the asteroid field, and the Savior slowed to a crawl. The large, jagged asteroids loomed like silent sentinels, their massive shadows creeping across the hull of the ship. Every movement had to be precise, every decision vital. "Steady," Kira murmured, gripping the edge of her command chair. "Take us in slow. We can't afford to make a mistake." Lieutenant Johnson looked up from his station. "Captain, we've detected enemy ships within the asteroid field. They're trying to set up an ambush." "Ready our weapons," Kira ordered. "Prepare to engage at close range." The human fleet slipped into the asteroid field, moving with calculated precision. The enemy ships, barely visible among the dense rock and debris, began to fire. The Sager shuddered as a blast hit one of its side shields, but the energy barrier held strong. The battle within the asteroid field was chaotic. Ships darted between massive asteroids, using the debris as cover. The Sager fired its weapons with deadly accuracy, each blast striking the enemy ships with devastating effect. The human fleet was faster, more agile, and better coordinated. The alien ships, while still formidable, were slower in the narrow confines of the asteroid field. "We've taken down 2 ships," Commander Johnson reported. "But there's more coming. We've got to reach the enemy command center before it's too late." Kira's heart raced as she scanned the view screen. The enemy flagship was just ahead, looming ominously against the backdrop of the asteroid field. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. "Fire on the enemy flagship," Kira commanded. The Sager's guns roared to life, sending a barrage of energy blasts toward the alien flagship. The impact sent shockwaves through space, but the flagship's shields held firm. "They're reinforcing their shields," Daniel said. "We're not getting through with just standard firepower." Kira's mind raced. They needed a new strategy, and fast. "Send out a signal to the fleet. We need to hit them with everything we've got. Focus all firepower on their weak points," Kira ordered. The fleet adjusted their formation, moving into position for a concentrated attack. Every ship was in sync, firing at the same time, a unified front against the enemy's strongest ship. The first wave of blasts hit the flagship's shields, weakening them slightly. The second wave was even more effective, cracking the defenses. "That's it. We're breaking through," Johnson shouted. Kira didn't wait to see the result. She knew they had one shot at this. "Now, take out their engines," she commanded. "Cut them off from escaping." Another barrage of fire erupted from the human fleet, hitting the flagship's engines with pinpoint accuracy. The alien ship shuddered, smoke pouring from its damaged engines. It was losing power, and fast. The enemy flagship was now vulnerable. Kira's heart pounded in her chest as she ordered the final strike. "All ships, target their reactor. Now." The final wave of fire hit the enemy flagship in a concentrated burst. There was a brief pause, a tense moment where everything seemed to freeze. Then, with a deafening explosion, the alien flagship erupted in a brilliant flash of light. The blast was so intense that it illuminated the entire asteroid field, sending shockwaves through space. The flagship was destroyed. The battle was over. For a moment, Kira could only stare at the debris that remained. Humanity had won. Against all odds, they had defeated the alien threat. But as the ship's crew cheered, Kira's mind wandered back to the larger picture. This was just one victory. The galaxy had been watching, but the war was far from finished. There would be others who would try to challenge humanity's place in the galaxy. And next time, humanity would be ready. As the last remnants of the alien fleet scattered, Kira stood tall, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. The galaxy had called for aid, and humanity had responded. But the war was far from over. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The galaxy was still reeling from the massive assault by the alien invaders, but now, with the defeat of their flagship, the humans had proven that they could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's greatest threats. But Kira knew that the enemy was not one single force. There were more, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike when the time was right. And as much as humanity had risen to meet the challenge, the true test had yet to come. On the bridge of the Savior, Kira stood in front of the view screen, her mind racing with the implications of what had just happened. The alien fleet was decimated, their leadership scattered, but there were whispers of something far worse coming from the distant corners of the galaxy. "Captain, we're receiving an encrypted transmission," Lieutenant Daniels called from his console. "It's from an unknown source." Kira turned sharply. "Put it through." The screen flickered, and a holographic image appeared, an ancient-looking alien figure, its face obscured by shadows, but the tone of its voice sent chills down Kira's spine. "You may have won this battle, humans," the figure rasped, "but you have not won the war. We are the Forgotten Forces, and we will make your victory meaningless." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the crew in stunned silence. "What was that?" Commander Johnson asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Kira's face hardened. "That wasn't a message from the alien fleet we've been fighting. This is something older." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of her officers. "The Forgotten Forces. We've heard rumors, but we thought they were just stories. This changes everything." The Forgotten Forces were an ancient faction, older than the current galactic powers, and rumored to be so powerful that even the alien fleets feared them. Kira had only heard whispers about them, most of it dismissed as myth or legend. But now it seemed that those stories were true. "Do we have any idea where they are?" Lieutenant Johnson asked. Daniels nodded grimly. "The signal was weak, but we've traced it to a planet in the Epsilon sector. It's a dead zone, far beyond the reach of most systems. No one's been able to get close in centuries." Kira's jaw clenched. The Epsilon sector was a graveyard of abandoned colonies, lost civilizations, and forgotten wars. The fact that the Forgotten Forces had chosen to hide there was no coincidence. It meant they had a power that could bring the galaxy to its knees. "We're going," Kira said, her voice firm. "Prepare the fleet." The crew scrambled into action. The Savior powered up its engines, and the rest of the human fleet fell into formation. The journey to the Epsilon sector would be dangerous. It would take them deep into uncharted space, to a place where no human ship had ever ventured. As they approached the edge of the Epsilon sector, the atmosphere on the bridge was tense. There was no turning back now. They were about to enter the unknown, and with the Forgotten Forces waiting for them, it felt like they were walking straight into a trap. "All ships, stay close," Kira ordered. "We don't know what we're walking into. Keep your eyes open, and stay sharp." The sector was eerily quiet. The stars were dim, and the space around them felt empty. It was as if they had stepped into a forgotten part of the galaxy, where time itself had slowed. The only sign of life was the faint remnants of old, dead civilizations scattered across the planet's surface. The Savior cruised through the dark space, navigating through the remnants of long-dead stars and ruined planets. As they got closer to the planet where the transmission had originated, the crew began to feel the weight of history pressing down on them. This was a place where battles had been fought long ago, and now, it seemed, they were about to face a new chapter in the galaxy's dark history. Approaching the planet, Daniels reported. It's an abandoned world, nothing but ruins and wreckage. No signs of life. Kira nodded, her eyes never leaving the view screen. We've been sent here for a reason. Keep scanning the area. We need to find their base of operations. Suddenly, an alert sounded. Captain, we've detected energy signatures on the surface, Daniel said, his voice sharp with surprise. Something, or someone, is down there. Kira's heart skipped a beat. Prepare for a landing. We're going in. The Savior descended toward the planet's surface, weaving through the jagged, lifeless landscape. The dark clouds swirling above the ruins of ancient cities created a sense of foreboding, as if the planet itself was watching them. As they touched down, the ship's engines whined to a halt. The crew gathered in the hangar bay, their weapons ready. There was no telling what lay ahead, but Kira knew they had to press forward. The Forgotten Forces were not going to make this easy. Stay close, Kira said, leading her crew out of the ship. We stick together. No one goes off alone. The air was thick with tension as they moved through the wreckage of an ancient city, its broken structures towering over them like silent witnesses to a forgotten past. The once mighty civilization was now nothing but dust, its secrets buried deep beneath the ruins. We're not alone, Commander Johnson muttered, his eyes scanning the shadows. Before Kira could respond, the ground beneath them shook violently. A loud, mechanical roar echoed in the distance, followed by the sound of powerful engines. A large metallic structure began to rise from beneath the ruins, a hidden base, long buried and forgotten. The ground trembled as the structure began to ascend, revealing a massive fortress, its dark silhouette towering over the ruins. It was clear now. This was the stronghold of the Forgotten Forces. Kira's heart raced. They had found it. The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin. Move out, Kira shouted. We've found their home base. It's time to end this. As the crew of the Savior prepared to face the ancient threat, Kira's thoughts raced. The Forgotten Forces had risen from the shadows, and now they would meet the full force of humanity's might. The galaxy had no idea what was coming, but Kira knew one thing for sure. Humanity had come too far to be stopped now. The final confrontation was about to begin, and it would be a fight to the death. The atmosphere on the barren planet was thick with tension. As the massive metallic fortress rose from the ruins, the sound of distant mechanical growls reverberated through the air, a grim warning that the battle was far from over. Kira stood at the front of her crew, her expression set in stone. Her mind raced, but there was no turning back now. The galaxy's fate lay in their hands. We know what we're up against, Kira said, her voice calm but firm. The Forgotten Forces are ancient, and their power is unlike anything we've faced before. But we have something they don't: our will to survive. Humanity's strength has brought us this far, and it will carry us through to the end. Her words resonated with the crew. There was no fear in their eyes, only resolve. They had faced the impossible and come out victorious. Today would be no different. The base before them was vast, an architectural marvel of long-lost civilizations. The structure towered above them, its dark, metallic surface gleaming under the light of distant stars. Ancient weapons, hidden deep within the base, had already begun to power up, their energy signatures unmistakable. The Forgotten Forces were preparing for a fight, but so were humanity's finest. Everyone stay sharp, Kira continued, looking over her team. We move in, eliminate the threats, and shut down their weapon systems. We'll have one shot at this. The crew nodded, weapons at the ready, as they approached the base. The ground beneath their boots shook, sending dust and debris into the air. The mechanical growl grew louder, and Kira could feel the weight of history bearing down on them. This was a place of ancient power, a place where civilizations had either risen or been crushed. And now, it was their turn to leave their mark on it. The entrance to the base opened with a low, grinding noise. The air inside was cold and sterile, unlike the warmth of human ships. Dim, flickering lights illuminated long, empty corridors that stretched into darkness. The silence was deafening. It was as if the base was waiting for them, anticipating their every move. "Stay in formation," Kira ordered. "We don't know what we'll find inside." The team moved cautiously, weapons raised. Every shadow could hide a trap. Every corner could conceal an enemy. But as they ventured deeper into the base, the silence grew oppressive, and the unease in the air was palpable. "We're getting close," Lieutenant Daniels said, his voice tense. "The energy signatures are coming from this level." As they reached a large reinforced door at the end of the corridor, the doors slid open with a hiss. What lay beyond was nothing short of monstrous. In the center of the room stood an enormous machine, an ancient weapon unlike any Kira had ever seen. It was powered by strange, pulsating energy that crackled in the air. The Forgotten Forces had built this weapon long ago, a device capable of wiping out entire star systems, and it was ready to fire. "This is it," Kira whispered. "We need to destroy it before it can be activated." Before they could make their move, a voice echoed from the darkness behind them. "You think you can stop us, humans?" The voice was cold and malevolent. The figure that stepped out of the shadows was tall and imposing, an alien like none they had ever seen. It was the leader of the Forgotten Forces, the one who had been pulling the strings behind the chaos. "We are the Forgotten Forces," the alien continued, "and we have waited millennia for this moment. You humans, you don't understand. You never will." Kira's eyes narrowed. This was it, the final showdown. She stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "We understand more than you think," Kira replied, her voice steady. "We understand the cost of fighting for a future, for the freedom of the galaxy, and we understand that you've underestimated us. This ends now." The alien leader sneered, raising its hand to activate the weapon. But before it could do so, Kira's team sprang into action. Commander Johnson fired a shot that struck the alien leader's arm, forcing him to stagger back. Daniels and Lieutenant Harper followed, securing the perimeter and preventing any escape routes. Kira charged forward, her weapon drawn, and aimed at the control panel of the massive machine. The alien leader snarled in fury, but Kira didn't hesitate. She fired at the panel, her shot hitting the target dead center. Sparks flew as the energy in the room surged, and the machine let out a deafening roar of protest. "No," the alien leader screamed, rushing toward the control panel. But it was too late. With a final powerful blast, the weapon's core exploded, sending a shockwave through the room. The walls trembled as the machine crumbled to the ground, its power source finally destroyed. The Forgotten Forces' weapon was no more. The alien leader fell to the ground in defeat, its eyes filled with rage and disbelief. You've doomed us all," it hissed, before crumpling to the floor, its body lifeless. Kira stood over the wreckage of the machine, her breath heavy with exertion. The team gathered around her, their expressions a mixture of relief and exhaustion. They had done it. The galaxy was safe, for now. "We've won," Kira said quietly, but there was no triumph in her voice. She knew this victory was just the beginning. The galaxy was forever changed, and the cost of this battle would be felt for generations to come. But one thing was certain: humanity had proven itself once again. The Forgotten Forces were gone, their ancient weapon destroyed. But the galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Kira looked out over the ruined base, the dust settling around them. She could already see the stars shining brightly once more, a symbol of hope in a dark universe. The war might be over, but the fight for the galaxy's future had just begun. As the crew of the Savior made their way back to the ship, Kira felt a deep sense of pride. Humanity had faced impossible odds and had come out on top. And for the first time in a long while, she felt that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy was finally starting to realize what humanity was capable of. The final battle was over, but the story of humanity's rise was far from finished. The future was theirs to shape, and Kira knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, humanity would rise to meet them, together.